Hello again. I was telling you about all the false news that gets released and about its links to MI6, to people like Kevin Cahill who work for MI6, who work for assassins in the militias and the secret services like the SAS that are appended to MI6 and its international operations. And a lot of its international operations involve the brutalisation of Ireland, which is why he was jailed when we started to report the fact that Kevin Cahill is the advisor to him and him. Yeah, Prime Ministers and opposition figureheads who just happen to be responsible in their time in office in coalitions in the Irish troubles and fixing it. His name is Paddy. Isn't that funny? He is Gerry Adams, and he's been one of the religious factions that holds Ireland to ransom on sectarian division for decade after decade. There is absolutely no need for it, but were it for their greed. They are false flags in their political lives, and I've seen Lib Dems this afternoon who have the palsied left eye and they are working men in my town, but they've also been politicians at the level of the European Parliament, and it is absolutely sick that this one here, who's Martin Sorrell, he has crashed the Irish economy twice for personal gain, and that's him speaking at the World Economic Forum. I mentioned his appearances on Squawk Box around about the time when the Russians were hosting the World Economic Forum in 2014. That was when Prince Charles demonised Putin. Putin is just a slave from the intel sector who was gifted Russia because of the dismemberment of New Zealand, which I'm very fond of, and I will create the revenge attack environment until these people resign or are jailed. This one's relatively innocent as far as I can see. He's Lord Laird Artivigan. Cahill was also his advisor. So let me take you back, and I'm going to take you back into the Chipping Norton set, the Red Nose Day criminals, the athlete criminals, and the entertainment sector criminals, because all of them are interlocked with all of these traitors, which is why the whole story is of interest to the treason movement. It's not at all of interest to MI6, because they are the culprits. They are having to be tracked down by unpaid people who work for the challenge of doing something decent in society that can take our country back to greatness and prosperity. They have it all tucked away in Geneva and the havens globally. They're not all in Switzerland, let me assure you of that. So this is the image that I missed this morning when I made the video about the manipulation of the press and the role of women in turning that around. She's been defamed, she has a cancer, but all of the news that is released is openly manipulated by these people. And this evening I've been banned from reading the papers in Sainsbury's by local working men. And even my controller from the Melrose region did not have the courage to intervene as I begin to talk to everybody that enters the door of Lord Sainsbury's supermarket, and I talk to them about how the working man is being undermined by fraud. Lord Sainsbury is Britain's richest former politician on the Forbes rich list, and he sold Sainsbury's into the Lloyds banking group toxic debt pool in 2001. Isn't that funny? And he's been an enemy of mine since he sparked as the British Science Minister the obesity epidemic all across the G8 countries by marketing the foodstuffs that he should know better as the Science Minister in making people shapely like Angelina Jolie, but making them live long because they live innocent and fit lives. Okay, I'm blathering away on relatively minor topics. Let's take you back to Sir Richard Dearlove, who used to run that place, and his dad in the legless sector. Okay, this is one on how to report serious fraud in Scotland, and the serious fraud in Scotland is all at the hands of the usual suspects. That's Ronnie Barker. The Barkers translated the Christian Bible. That's Stephen House. He's lost his case to actually stop kids on the streets of Scotland and strip search them, or to search them, and vigorously, and reported in my last capacity to read the papers in Scotland, he is stopped and searched children aged between 1 and 2. They are so desperate now to cover their sins that they are telling absolutely unbelievable stories on the front pages of our Scottish newspapers. Those are the national newspapers like the Telegraph and the Guardian. And here's another scam that I mentioned in the earlier video. That's Lord Mackay of Clashfern, the leading law enforcer in Scotland, and there is Mackay in the porridge programme, which is the joke about law enforcement in Scotland. Nicholas Fairbairn was a hopelessly twisted sexual deviant, and he was responsible for sexual health in Scotland, and was rejected as, or eventually bombed out of the highest law enforcement role in Scotland, and was replaced by Lord Mackay of Clashfern, which is very close to Gordon Brown's radioactive beach. Gordon Brown is advised by Ashdown at the MI6, and this is from the wall of the Kelso police station on how to report serious fraud in Scotland. The reporting vent for serious fraud in Scotland is a PO box number in the City of London, adjacent to the MI6 building. Are you getting the picture? And there are the war crimes joke about Colditz, and there are the war crimes jokes about the jokers who made the Colditz movies as the two Ronnies, and that is them laughing at the Moira Anderson killing, which got Stephen House's massive pay rise. Okay, let's keep going back. It gets worse. So this morning we covered these people, and we got around to this slide and how they're involved in the joking sector, how they're involved in pathologies because they steal from their people in the country, and they have to get involved in marital division because my divorce case is proceeding in parallel with all of these crimes. I have no income because I'm an honest man. They are villains, and that is how the world is run. And I'm an expert in the pathologies that they get as a result of their crimes. Yeah, I can show you the book that we have on my area of expertise, when the Welcome were world leaders in the treatment of diabetes. That's type 1 diabetes, not the maturity onset, which is associated with Lord Sainsbury's obesity epidemic, which was sparked entirely by him and the retailers who will sell you the Orca Fat products regardless of its effect on your health. Okay, and I will not at this stage tell you the name of the young man that had the courage to come up to me and tell me to get away from the newspaper stand because he's paid to do it. one of his names is very closely associated with the Arius name, okay, and the Scottish quislings that mean that Scotland can never thrive. And one of its offshore islands, I'm giving you too many clues. The man is relatively innocent. He's just out of his boyhood, and he's got more bottle than the people from Melrose, who are sent to Kelso to keep an eye on me really, really closely. But they know that the links to Northampton, which I exposed, and the links to the Napoleonic culls, which their history teacher was aware of, that history teacher died really suddenly, and the Melrose man was really spooked by that, and the Melrose man that weekend that his teacher died embraced me, and the tears were running down his cheeks. I don't know how the gods do it, but they know that if ordinary working men stand in my way and they allow these criminals to thrive at the working man's expense, then there will be an adverse outcome for them. That slide I did not show you this morning. That's Rupert Murdoch giving you the rabbit sign, which is the two fingers. I will not swear in this video. I want to show you that it takes a bit of maturity and responsibility to fix all these things. Now this is a different set of slides on the Chipping Norton set, and it gives you access to other website pages on the massive crimes that they commit. Okay, and there's the directors on the Comic Relief Board: Bill Schwebel, Charles William Dunstan, Christopher Hill, David Peter, Jonathan Ross, Ian Christopher West, Michael Alexander, Nigel Richard Spray, Roger William Taylor, Timothy Joseph Gerard O'Gorman, Miss Anne Stirling, and you've got a series of previous directors, and you've got how even in the free press in Britain, Comic Relief invests millions in arms, tobacco and alcohol. So it's a lot worse than that. And here you've got the list of the Comic Relief characters that are involved in the frauds. So you've got Richard Curtis, Lenny Henry were the creators, and the Comic Relief shows this year, the year that this was published, were presented by Lenny Henry, Jonathan Ross, Davina McCall, Desmond O'Leary, Russell Brand, David Tennant, Claudia Winkleman, Alan Carr, James Corden, that is from the Gavin and Stacey film, the Gavin and Stacey comedy, and Gavin and Stacey's surname is Shipman. And the poof in Gavin and Stacey is now giving you globalised shipping tours to cover up the crimes of Michael Moore and the P&O sector. Michael McIntyre, Jack Whitehall, John Bishop, the Liverpool working man, and the sporting fraudster and diversionary tool all at the same time. Rob Brydon is the poof dat in Gavin and Stacey that got his knighthood the week that we exposed that Shipman was the war correspondent for Iraq. They are really quick at rewarding the villains. David, and so is God. David Williams is the last member that year. I think this was, and it started in, I think, 1966. And you can see that the red-nosed militias in sub-Saharan Africa and the teddy bear joke about the Rothschilds, the world's owners, is absolutely vicious, and it's right up there on all of the things that they invest their money on, and none of the money ever goes back to the innocents in Africa. And we talked about the culling of the people in Biafra after they had starved their children. And there's the Comic Relief directors and secretaries. Mr. Charles Nicholas Cortland. It's too low a resolution for me to read those. Let me expand it a little bit. because the directorial details are the straw that will break the camel's back. They cannot deny that. So Charles Nicholas Garland, Colin MacGregor Howes, Peter Walker, Stephen Edward Leach, Theodore Paffetz, Anna Bateson, Tricia Adele Clark, oh that could be Adele, that's speculation, Lord Timothy John Lee Bart, Miss Jane McCarroll, I still cannot see it properly, Mr. Alan Parker, Mr. John McGowan, Mr. Duncan Water Bannatyne. Now Bannatyne is important in the frauds I'm going to tell you about Lloyd's of London, the shipping sector, and the ownership of the Northern Isles off the west coast of Scotland, because they wrote books on the history of Scottish tartans and the fairy flags, and they're also involved in the brutalisation and ownership of the vast tracts of land in Russia and in the music opera sectors and the composer sectors, where Russia's greatest composers were defamed as homosexuals in movies that were made by deviants in the City of London, and the music of those people is the greatest music that the world has known with the possible exception of Mozart. So they hit on the geniuses who are capable of passing on the words of God or the music of the gods to the people of this earth, and then they make jokes about them and their sexuality in Hollywood movies. Okay, so that's the Bannatyne word. There's a massive cover-up, I'll tell you about that in the Isle of Skye stories. Eric Luciano Nicot, Mr. George Edward Entwistle, the fat cat at the BBC who got £500,000 for doing a couple of months' work when he was involved in the cover-up of the paedophilia scandals at the BBC, and he was appointed by and sacked with the remuneration by Lord Patton, who's had the heart attack. Mr. James Edward Heitmer, Mr. Jeremy Eric Richard Marston, Mr. Joe Cerno, Mr. John Crowther Mackinson, Mr. John Hobson Coulter, Mr. Kevin Paul Jackson, Mr. Lawrence Richard Simon Newman, Mr. Lenworth George Henry. Oh, they don't just call themselves Lenny, they've got very posh names. Mr. Matthew Rupert Freud. You remember the Lilith jokes about Freud? I'll show you the movies. Let me show you that before we go very much further, about women and their conditioning and their capacity to be manipulated by men who try and run the world by mind control and psychological means. I'll just get YouTube to open that up. YouTube, Lilith, Cheers, bar, hypnosis. The Freuds are legendary in the development of psychiatric treatments and in the incarceration of innocents in straitjackets for things that are impinging on their money stream at the top of society. So Mr. Matthew Rupert Freud, Mr. Michael James Souter, Mr. Michael Ross Harris, also involved off the western coast of Scotland in the jokes about the mythology of world leadership and the involvement of the Jewish nation in all of that. Mr. Peter Bennett Jones, Mr. Prince Albert Tucker. All of the names keep coming up. Mr. Richard Whaley Anthony Curtis, Mr. William Henry Reimer Caton, Miss Claudia Jane, somebody Lloyd, the shipping people and the wreckers, Miss Diana Baran, Miss Emma Valency Freud. Okay, and that is that must be a daughter, because I think Elizabeth Murdoch is Lizzie Freud now. Oh, merde. Okay, and we've got, so Emma Valency Freud, Mrs. Imelda Mary Walsh, Miss Jane Eve Bennett. Now the Bennets are involved in kidnaps, and all of the Able Danger name people know the name Bennett, and they will not know that these people are on the board of Red Nose Day. You've got Miss Joanne Kathleen Rowling, who lives on the Lothian, on the coast of the Firth of Forth, where the Balfours used to live, in the House of Shaws. Yeah, it's in the Cramond region, where the woman who was the fascist in the schoolgirl sector, that's Miss Jean Brodie, used to take her elite boyfriends for a good weekend in Cramond. That's where J.K. Rowling lives, and that is where the little child, Mikhail, went missing. He was found in Lord Mackay of Clashfern region and in Gordon Bowden's constituency near the radioactive beach. Isn't it sick what they're allowed to get away with in the false news sector? Miss Melinda Letts, Miss Naomi Verman, Miss Olabini Adelerier Fayemi, Miss Priscilla Deborah Snowball, Miss Sir Stephen Redgrave, and Theodore Soma or something. It's very indistinct at the bottom, and some of those names may be slightly incorrect, but you can look at them in higher resolution on my website when you have more time to do that. And you've got current directors at the bottom. There are no really famous names there as far as I'm aware, and you've got the charity projects and the amount of money that they take each year. Registered in Hanover Square in London, W1S 1HP. Charity projects 01806 414. Okay, that's a different set of charitable scams, and we could look at the charity projects listing again. That will be very similar, but there's a Cohen on it. There's a Salmon on it. There's the Harrises are still there. You've got, what else have you got? The Snowballs are on that one too. June McCarroll, Mr. Alec John McGivern, and the Bannatyne character, Entwistle again. Okay, so there's the charity projects number 01806 414. All of them are on the take. All of them are on having a laugh at the citizens on the telly, and all of the stuff that they claim to be funding in sub-Saharan Africa is just neglected as part of the joke. Okay, Sir Stephen Redgrave, that's the diabetes victim. Now I think I'm going to take you back to other, and the Cohens link us in to the High Priests of Israel and the Rothschild dynasty in all their grandeur. Take you back and show you more of the frauds. I mentioned Richard Dearlove this morning. I need to give you a profiling of what he does. Okay, this is more about General Sir Mike Jackson, and General Sir Mike Jackson is linked in the private security industry to a woman called Rebecca Brooks, who was all over the news events that I gave you this morning, and all about the sickening role of her in the monitoring of what is happening in all of Britain's households, the interlocking of her to university professors who are former intel experts in MI5 and out of the GCHQ, that's Miss Manning and Buller, and you've got a whole raft of registrations for Rebecca Brooks. She's involved in with people that are in my local region, and they're also private security experts. Okay, Brooks and Coulson, who delivered all the secrets that Cameron Murdoch hired them for, and those secrets they bought from the Met Police, from lords in law enforcement now in the second chamber in Westminster, that's Lord Condon, or retired to large estates and pensions in Kirkwhelpington, that's Lord Stevens of Kirkwhelpington. He is he's the Chancellor at Northumbria University in Newcastle, where Tiny Rowlands started his career in asset stripping. After he'd done the dirty on Lonro in South Africa, and after he was let out of an internment camp on the Isle of Man, which will become relevant when you look at what happens in the Highlands of Scotland and off the west coast. Okay, and that man, Lord Condon, is the boss at the G4S, and he's part of the Halliburton gravy train and the links to Dick Cheney and the shock doctrine profiteers that are in the American government, and are actually the terrorists that brutalise all of the world in the name of Homeland Security. Okay, and the BBC links to that man Entwistle, who gets the massive remuneration to be in office for just a few months after Jimmy Savile's sins have been proclaimed. Okay, and let me take you down to the bottom of that just in case we miss something, because Mike Jackson's security firms, he's more involved in, because of the exposures of his bragging in Hansard about how much he can make in private security, he's had to tone it down a little bit. And because of all of the things that we are exposing about his career in the Balkans and in Ireland, he is on the back foot now. Okay, several generations of war criminals assemble at your local war memorial parish church. The names of the dead are not remembered as the poppy fund war grave tourism thrives. Okay, that's the royal family and all of the political profiteers all along the back for about 40 or 50 years. John Major, I think, is the last surviving one. Mrs. T was buried, and I mentioned that this morning. Okay, here's all of the traitors and all of the usual suspects in the monarchy. Fergie, or the launch of the Manchester United things, or the launch of the getting the menialisation of women and their demonisation of the innocents, who are the comedians, relatively innocents, who are the celebrities in the musical sector, and they kill and martyr the musicians as they continue to steal and brutalise the world and give Oscars to their cynical films about sinking ships for profit, for the insurance value for Lloyd's of London, and they kill the war criminals who are defending their innocent countries. And that's General Sir Mike Jackson with Prince Charles and Prince Philip in all their medals as they brutalise Ireland and the Balkans. And there are the jokes about Michael Jackson, who's the cover for General Sir Mike Jackson, who's interlocked with Malaria No More, and he is an overlapping director with Rebecca Brooks on that company, and that's Malaria No More out of Switzerland. Okay, there you've got Barroso, who was trained by Henry Kissinger in Georgetown. This is just the front page of my website all over again. There's the UBS check for the crimes on the nuclear weapons that has never been cleared or honoured, and those weapons are still out there somewhere. But I do not believe that the threat of the nuclear weapons is as real as the threat as the economic crimes. There's David Laws, who emptied the Treasury within the first fortnight. He negotiated the right to do that as a former executive at Barclays and at the I forget which the other bank was, I think JP Morgan, who Tony Blair also gets his retainers from. And there's the shocking news that the Bank of England has got union leaders and virtual products fraudsters all over the board, and they are tucking the money away from the central bank that should be funding all of democracy's activity, but instead they give it to themselves and their vicious friends in all of these organisations. Okay, and again we've got all the director numbers of all the criminals in all these scams, and you've got the programmes today and national traitors. So secret services, chiefs, PMs and NATO Israeli army commanders and private security profiteers. Yeah, I'm going to show you that web page next. So this is quick because I want to get you to the nub. There's Spicer, the man that is involved in the Trident scandal. So this is Aegis, and that involves the black man that we've talked about, that was brought in, like Malala is brought in, and like Zahawi was brought in, to become a schoolboy in Hemel Hempstead, and then he becomes a director at Aegis Defence Services Limited. Boateng is the name of that man. Okay. It's amazing. They're allowed literally to get away with murder, and he's a mercenary army leader who murders all of the African victims of the charities that we've just described on that earlier page. Okay, he's the director at Trident. Timothy Spicer is a British former army officer, ex-CEO of the private security company Aegis Defence Services. That's private security. We've got all of their director registrations. They, like Trident, are at 84 Eccleston Square, London, SW1V 1PX. The man Gambon that appears in the ads as I make my videos about the frauds in the elite fascist sector, Gambon is, I've forgotten what I was going to tell you about him. In the movie that he is advertising, as he crops up and says something terrible has happened, that movie is directed by an Eccleston. That's how they cover up the crimes. But the way that they cover up the crimes here is that you're unable, even by writing to the police, attending the police office, by talking to Paul Wheelhouse, Deputy Justice Minister, in the supermarket where I'm not allowed to read the papers unless I buy it first. They're going to pay for that. I'm going to get the crimes of Lord Sainsbury and his organisation exposed, and the Melrose controller knows how articulate I am in all of my campaigns. He respects me and he fears me. I do not threaten anyone, I just expose the lies that are printed in the papers and the cover-ups about the deployment of mercenary armies in sub-Saharan Africa by our charitable leaders and by the companies that are registered in these secret places. Yeah? Gambon is also a joke about the shin. The Gambon is the shin bone, and that is part of the kosher butchery jokes that I've been sharing with you on the pan-religious frauds for the last 2 or 3 weeks. So there's Tim Spicer that I've referred to peripherally in previous exposures, and there are some of the people at Aegis. Look at them. Could they stop a criminal like Lord Patton? Even if they wanted to, could they rugby tackle him and pin him to the ground? Yeah, that is Field Marshal Lord Peter A. Inge, Knight of the Order of the Garter. They've got the same badge as all of the British police have on their lapel. All of the British police have their pension funds screwed by all of those people. That's Peter Penfold, Julius Chan, Tony Buckingham, Simon Mann. Yeah? They're all running the armies in other people's countries, where NATO are the war criminals. And I've been rejected at the University of Hertfordshire for my innocent campaign to become a pharmacy professor again. They put a man in from the civil service because he's got access to the funds. Yeah? He has no academic background. He's part of this team. Yeah? He's and when I start talking to him about the crimes in the financial sector, he immediately shuts me down. And all of the letters that went to him went also to the Prime Ministers in Chipping Norton and the Whitney region, where the Whitney Houston crime was launched to cover their sins. Okay, there is Boateng, educated out of Africa in Hemel Hempstead, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and then profiteering from other people's countries, being brutalised. Went to the same school as my brother-in-law, who is asset stripping the dentistry sector. Okay, General Sir Roger Wheeler, head of the British Army, Lieutenant General Sir Graham C.M. Lamb, Right Honourable Paul Yaw. Isn't that like the Yahweh story that I told you earlier about launching religion and stealing from the people using the gift of the gab? Boateng, new Labour Cabinet, Commissioner, Republic of South Africa, where the nuclear weapons are traded and the cheque is never cleared, and the Breden camps, as soon as I publish all of that, come and fish on that elite River Tweed, where the gypsies have the gall, because of their reputation as killers and murderers and people that will punch you on the jaw even if you're a copper. Yeah, that is entirely twisted. But the gypsies are allowed to leave the rubbish on the bank, and they fish the river that costs £7,000 per rod per week for free as poachers with no police intervention, and the gillies that are slaves to Walter Scott and the Freemasons and have the goat wandering around on the bank as an icon for what they do, they are unprepared to work on behalf of the working man. Nicholas Soames is Winston Churchill's grandson, warlords in pinstripes. Okay, and you've got the results of all of this is the complete dismemberment of society and our capacity to lead our country and to do anything on behalf of our country. All of it is about private profit. The next monarchs are coming from someone who worked in the prostitution dens, and that is Kate in the Killing Kittens nightclub. And somewhere else on the website I have the registered corporate details for that organisation, which has now been closed for reputational reasons. And that was the Miley Cyrus prancing around nearly naked, and all of this still goes on. The raping issues, all of the stuffs that we see in Braveheart, all of the abuse of the women, it happens in the royal bedroom, and he is the type of deviant that allows it to happen. That one there is Peter Sellers' dad, and Peter Sellers makes a movie about the legitimate King of England in being there, which is based in the Isle of Wight, where Marcus Manuel was brought up. Isn't it funny? And MI6 is run by Prince Philip, and all of the illegitimate children are because the Queen has the decency to kick him out of the bedroom after he's sired the first two. That's Princess Anne Lawrence and Charlie Boy that killed his own wife, or Prince Philip had her killed, because she knew about their children and the children, their grandchildren that were in Australia, and there being too many people in this family. That's Princess Diana, who was taken down because she confronted these people, and the people that were involved in the landmine scandal. That is Bredenkamp. Okay? I don't know whether or not Bredenkamp's friends from the Gloucester and the Bristol region with the heavy West Country accents that came up to me and talked to me on the junction pool on the River Tweed. The junction pool on the River Tweed is run by a miller, and the millers are right up to their neck in the jokes, and they are part of that rabbit team. I am not cutting any corners anymore. This is a war. They are brutalising our country and its capacity to be prosperous, and I am going to bring them down unless they take me out. Irish Troubles, right in the heart of the bloody Sunday battles. Deputy head of NATO's armies. This is the man that is covered by him. Okay? CIC up to 2004, Blair regime and Knight of the Order of the Bath, bailed out into private security business after the deaths of tens of thousands in the Balkans, millions in Iraq, and 18-year-old passer-by and father of two murdered in his regiment in Ireland under Tim Spicer of the nuclear weapons scandal out of Eccleston Square's watch. Spicer also moved into private security and brutalised much of sub-Saharan Africa with mercenary soldiers and private contracts. I've got another hyperlink there. That, I think, is Peter McBride, which is one of the 18-year-old boys that was frisked and found to be weaponless and then were shot by these regimes. Not at all like Michael Jackson or his body doubles, who was persecuted at the pinnacle of General Jackson's career. I'm a pharmaceutical expert. He was killed by an intensive care anaesthetist. All of the things that they cover up are because they know that I'm going to come after them. And all of my resignations from the anaesthetic academic societies are based on principled decisions that they are involved in the terror and they are involved in the cover-ups. And I mentioned the Boston legless people. You need intensive care experts to tell lies if you want to perpetrate sins like that in the false news sector, and I will not have a bar of it. Okay, and there are the people. This one's dead. He was a local in the Balkans, tried to defend his country. There's General Sir Mike and some army with white hats. That could be military policemen ignoring all of their sins. And there he is talking to the usual suspects. Prince Charlie. All of his communications with anybody are not allowed to be published, and there is one of the hopeless doppelgangers for him, and he is sent from Jacksonville in America to purchase Fulham Football Club from Al Fayed. And the two people that are involved in the Lawrence of Arabia film that stick the stick up the camel's arse are Dodi and Farage. Okay. And that is the way the world is run. There is the murder victim Peter McBride, and there is the father of Dodi who was murdered with Princess Diana in the tunnel. I don't know whether any of those stories are true, but I do know that Ergo is real, and that is the page I'm going to take you to next. And it is quite frightening, even for a fraud researcher that has looked into the history of genocide. It's quite frightening in a business context and for the people who are on the board. He's not got the brutality to be on Ergo, but dear love has. Okay, let me see what else we might be missing if I'd go away from this web page already. And there's how you can get your holiday home or your massive estate for next to nothing if you're English speaking and you know the people that brutalised the place in the first place, so that we could become the owners of it as the English speaking nation. And the red-nosed people play cricket there as they raise funds for charity. Yeah, and all of that is published as a joke on the BBC. Okay, so we've been to the bottom of that. Let's go back another page and see if we can find the interlocks to Ergo. There we go. Okay, now Ergo is globalized. It's massive. Okay, it's got private security. That's Dear Love. His dad was the legless rower that launched the Paralympic movement. Okay, he's the head of MI6 at a very sensitive period of time. Now we've heard from Greg Hallett how Intel run the insurance industry, and I'm going to tell you in the Isle of Skye stuff how Lloyd's of London sink all the ships and profit from that, and they cull the innocents and the general army leaders that want to end wars quickly, like who's the one that Your Country Needs You, and he's pointing at you from the poster that got everybody into the army as volunteers. That is Kitchener, chucked off the side of the boat by Winston Churchill and his friends. The Ergo Advisory Board is equally ruthless. Okay, let me run you through it quickly in case I run out of time. Ehud Barak, Israeli Prime Minister and highly awarded defence specialist, so he's an Israeli Field Marshal. He's the Prime Minister in Israel. Ehud Barak. Barack Obama could be a trivial cover for a really serious criminal. Okay, there's the victim of the royal household who tried to put it all straight, and the mother of the princes now who say that they would kill under certain conditions when they visit in their massively armed helicopters the Argentina region and the Falkland Islands that we talked about with Mrs. Thatcher this morning. There's the funders of a lot of these scams, and there is John Anthony Chilcot, 1T, who is the chair of the Iraq Inquiry and is an overlapping director with Malcolm Rifkin, the Foreign Secretary. None of those things have been reported, despite my police incident numbers and my replies of receipt of all of the crimes and all of these website details to the Scottish Justice Secretary Michael Matheson. There's the legless Dear Love that launched the Paralympics, and there's the pictures from the Henry VIII movie that shows you how old these scams are. The killing of wives in the royal family because of the acts of God and the infertility of his semen. The semen is part of the Israeli Christianity jokes. I will tell you that at a later stage. Yeah, it is endless. So you've got the Prime Minister of Israel, you've got Raphael Bardaj, and he was National Security Advisor to Spain's former President Jose Maria. So you've got Joseph and Mary. Everybody laughs at the religious joke. I'm going to have to increase the resolution of this so I can see what I've actually written on my own website. Okay, so there's Raphael Bardaggi. So this is the Ergo board. Okay, right at the top of the criminality tree globally. Raphael Bardaggi, still active as a NATO global conflict strategist from neutral Spain. Yeah, neutral Spain in inverted commas. That is fascist Spain, relentlessly, and they launder all of the criminals out into the Canaries and then out into safe havens so that they can kill the communists and the ordinary people. And even in Latin America, the doctors and the teachers who tried to help, and the priests who were at the bottom of the food chain, unlike Pope, the new Pope that we have, who was at the top of the general's food chain. Yeah, the innocents in the Catholic Church help their parishioners. They get burned in the churches or they get shot in the stadia. Okay, Raphael Bardaggi, National Security Advisors to Spain's former President Jose Maria Aznar from 1998 to 2004. Also served as Executive Advisor to Minister of Defence Eduardo Serra and Federico Trillo. Bardaggi was the founder and director of the Grupo de Estudios Estratégicos and later the director of foreign policy at FAES, both global affairs think tanks in Madrid. Like the public policy studies units that all of the criminals, the Rothschilds, the union leaders sit on in Britain, and the pan-party, pan-continental fraudsters that link you into chambers of commerces on different continents or take you into Dubai where it's beyond regulation. Okay, Bardaggi is a member of the Strategic Advisory Board of NATO Special Operations Forces Command. That is the SAS style mercenary dirty tricks sector and the Atlantic Council. He is currently the CEO of Worldwide Strategy, a Miami-based consultancy. Alan Batkin, trained to kill for imperialist expansionism by Henry Kissinger and to make a killing at the Lehman Brothers that crashed the banks in the American side of the premeditated crimes in 2008. That is the equivalent of what Sir Ewan Brown got his knighthood after we had exposed him as a massive Ponzi scamster and bank crasher. Yeah, and all of the meerkat jokes and the links to the rabbits and all of the things that we're telling you about eternal fascism and stealing from global citizens for almost all of human history, using the complex financial tools and the simple religious mind control plan. Okay, Batkin was vice chairman of Eaton Park Capital Management, a large multidisciplinary investment firm, and vice chairman of Kissinger Associates. Oh, that's a famous name. I wonder why I recollect the name Kissinger. The world's biggest killer, a geopolitical consulting firm led by former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. He is currently the chairman of Converse Associates, a strategic consulting firm from 1972 to 1990. That's the Thatcherian brutality sector. Batkin was an investment banker and managing director at Lehman Brothers. He is a trustee. Yeah, the two go hand in hand. The linkage is inverted. And executive committee member of the Brookings Institution, that's the equivalent of Chatham House in America, where all the thieves get trained, and it's the equivalent of Tavistock, where Stalin and Hitler were trained. In America, everything is done in tower blocks, and even the ordinary working mason and the Monty Python's team are fascists, and they are lethal killers, and they laugh about everything. And that is the confirmation of the crimes that I am using to show that all of them should be locked up for life. Chairman Emeritus of the International Rescue Committee. Richard A. Clarke, globally feared for expertise in US Homeland Security overseas. Richard served the last 3 US presidents as senior White House advisor. Over the course of 11 years of White House service, he held the titles of Special Assistant to the President for Global Affairs, National Coordinator for Security and Counter-Terrorism. Isn't it good? Isn't it good that you can have a corporate document that tells people that you are trained to kill, and Special Advisor to the President for Cyber Security? He currently heads Good Harbour Consulting, a global provider of strategic safety, security and risk management consulting services. Sir Richard Dearlove, this is the made in Britain man. He's got to be reliable, hasn't he? Sir Richard, keeper of the international secrets, intelligence expert, astute enough to bring down the Twin Towers just before the expiry of securities and bonds which would impoverish the New World Order. Yeah? Insurance expert AIG, that's what the All Blacks rugby team have on their jerseys, and the All Blacks have had their country stolen from them as they prance around in a little dance that is a joke about Jewish armies killing people by taking women into the bedroom and beheading the invading forces. The haka is linked to the Hanukkah Jewish festival, but none of the All Blacks realise that before it's too late. Okay? And see the Ventura videos. Now, Jesse Ventura is an inspiring looking investigative journalist. He used to be an all-in wrestler. He's a massive man, and I've watched those videos and they're very convincing. I have no way of getting in touch with him. I don't know whether or not he's the real deal and genuine, but he looks like a courageous chap, and many of the people that are in the Able Danger movement have seen his activity to try and take America back to decency. Dearlove was head of MI6 from 1999 to 2004, now gone private, global, multilingual. Other advisors are Ergo below. And this is just a summary for the audience that are reading the website, because a lot of them have not got the time to think about their situation in life and why the university students are now impoverished. Frank Wisner, US State Defence Ambassador in brutalised junta countries and negotiator of Egypt's turmoil in 2011. That was when they elected an Islamic Brotherhood Prime Minister who's been disappeared by these people and the Homeland Security experts. Egypt gets $1 billion in US aid every year so that its citizens can never have a life. Admiral Sir Ian Forbes, KCBE, NATO Supreme Allied Commander. We've talked about Barack, he's up above, we've given you the whole profile, all bound to secrecy and effective local solutions in over 90 declared countries which are their customers. Their victims, more like. Full list of SS profiteers there, and that is the Ergo advisors. That's not the board. These are just the people that plan the execution of innocents on other continents from the back room that I've talked about throughout today's videos. And the women who cover it up include advisors to the President. I've been in touch with them in America. That's Bob Beckles and Dana Perino in America. I've been in touch with them for all of my 5 years as an activist. They will do nothing to stop the crimes. They were enslaved by the Bushes, and they were enslaved by the political regime in America, which is just a money stream. There is no integrity, there is no decision making. The current President Barack, who's on this list, the name Barack is in the Bible, the name Barack is in this listing. The current president is not even a US citizen. And because I know about all of that stuff, and I know about what's going on in the Ukraine, when I give my interview to Jim Fetzer, he has to cut it down to 1 hour instead of 2. But Jim Fetzer has known for years that Obama, who made the speech in the hour that I had to give up, is totally illegitimate and is a fraudster. And his wife has spent $2 million on holidays for her family. Okay, so here's Dear Love's profile. Former chief at the British Secret Intelligence Services, that's the SIS, MI6. During his 38-year tenure with MI6, he served in multiple international locations before managing the Washington DC office. That's where the Pentagon was brought down on 9/11, with all the royals in town that day, and later serving as Director of Operations and Assistant Chief. He is a member of the International Advisory Board of AIG, Chairman of ASCO Underwriting, Chairman of the Trustees of the Cambridge Union Society. That's Cambridge, that runs Christ College, that runs the Apostles, that runs the Intel, that runs the perpetual warring and the religious fraud at the same time. And all of those colleges in Oxford and Cambridge write the New Testament in English as it's translated from Greek and Latin. Currently a Master of Pembroke College, University of Cambridge. And then there's a link to my articles on these fraudsters and how they have imposed the student fees, and how the student loans company is made up of university leaders like Lord Whelpington, Lord Stevens of Kirk Whelpington, and Miss Manningham Buller of MI5, and all of them appoint only security experts to the governance of that university and to the academic staff base, and all of the decent researchers have no funds at all because of their crimes. Admiral Sir Ian Forbes, this is still the Ergo advisory list. It's not the board. Goodness only knows. I nearly said the F word again. I'm getting like Billy Connolly did late in life, and I lost respect for Billy Connolly on that. I now have no respect at all for Billy Connolly, because he's a deserter to the working man's cause, and he is also a joker at the ownership of the world. He's got prostate cancer. Naval powerhouse for Thatcher, Major Blair and NATO Supreme Allied Commander. Yeah, Britain rules the waves, and now it's in the private security for cash business. Retired from the Royal Navy in 2004, commanded 4 warships: Kingfisher, Diomede, Chatham and Invincible. Diomede, the gods' jokes; Chatham House, the academia jokes; Kingfisher, the religious fish joke again; and Invincible, don't know what that is. I have not sussed that as a punchline yet, and was engaged in conflict and crisis operations off Iceland, where the banks were crashed accidentally. Yeah, and the Falklands, and that cost Sally Magnuson of Songs of Praise and the Pishon literature to lose her pensions. The Falklands in the Gulf and in the Adriatic. Adriatic. Arias Piso. Isn't it funny that the whole world is run as a fraud for 2,000 years? Served as NATO Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Atlantic and acted as NATO Supreme Allied Commander. Mark Fuller, Professor at Harvard. Harvard's in Boston, where the Tea Party was and where the bombing occurred just before Mrs. Thatcher was buried on the streets of London. There were no protesters. The Boston Black Flag bombings occurred just before Mrs. T's peaceful funeral in London. Typical students from Chechnya were strategically shot dead in America as part of the false news program. Okay, they were typical students. The students are being robbed. So what you've got here is an out and out, barefaced exposure of how the lies are told by the media. The students get defamed for being cast into a life in debt on both sides of the Atlantic, and they are blamed as the people that killed the dead in the Boston bombing. The Boston bombing is a total fraud, and Peter Ayer has picked it to pieces, and the images that he has shown that were released to the world's press are total frauds. I've got the man in the wheelchair with one leg off and two legs off, chatting to the people who took those legs off, covered him in blood, and when you lose one limb you bleed to death in 7 seconds. He was chatting and fully conscious to his people who are just actors. But he had genuinely lost his legs, and I don't know whether it was in a car accident or whether it was in the militias. But when you see what the professors in intensive care are prepared to do in the elite hospitals, then that explains why I'm no longer involved with academic anaesthesia and all of the things that happen. When I was working at Imperial College London in West 1, right next door to where they harboured the victims of and this is the story about taking them into Marks and Spencer's. When I was there, whenever there was a controversial political incident, the guns were on the door of the intensive care unit and the corridor into the wards there, and they were heavily automatic weapons. They were really intimidating. And an innocent from the borders, which is full of green fields and sheep, yeah, you don't get things like that unless Prince Philip comes to call at the local castle. And when Prince Philip comes to call at the local castle, someone who's very close to me in the engineering sector fixes his phaeton carriage, which is used in the local agricultural shows, and they win prizes for it. When the wheel comes off that and the person who's close to me fixes it, he sees all of the people with the automatic weapons, and Prince Philip will not pay the bill. The Duke of Roxburgh paid it for him because he's a relatively decent chap, especially since he contracted his cancer. And the Duke of Roxburgh is prepared to talk to me, and that is a big change since when I first met him at Imperial College London, when he had his first child by his second wife. And when I approached him on the pavements and said, "Oh hello, you're the Duke," he accused me of being a pressman and refused to talk to me. Even after he had heard my accent and my declaration that I'm just one of his feudal serfs. Yeah, and all it takes is a little bit of decency. I've met his former wife. She is an excellent person. She talks to the innocent locals and she inspires them. But she's from one of the banking dynasties that were involved in the massive scandals in the Norwegian and in the pan-continental profiteering in wartime. I forget what I think it was the SOS that they were in, that family. Yeah, and all of it is ever so interbred, and all of it is involving people that when you meet them face to face are just like you, and it's the peer pressure that does the damage. You dare not stand in their way, or you got what Princess Di got, or what Princess Grace got, or what Marilyn Monroe got, or what Whitney Houston got. But nobody knows, because of the false flag news sector, whether any of those things are real. Okay, but when the sun is under a cloud, when you talk about it, then I think I know that almost all of those crimes were real crimes, but the motives are so trivial It's incredible. And the fact that someone with Prince Philip's profile can order assassinations like that is quite stunning. And all of his narcotics running has gone uncontested by law enforcement all across the world. Private detectives or national traitors, the police will not take on these massive crimes. Okay. Mark Fuller, professor at Harvard, CEO of Monitor Group, and is currently the chairman of Rosk Global and Rosk Global Investments. Professor at Harvard Business School, and has authored more than 200 books. Now, we've heard about the eulogistic book authors like Enid Blyton and Winston Churchill, who may not actually be the authors of all of their output, because this is a huge globalized team effort to continue with the ownership of the brutalized globe. We're nearly at the bottom. Neil Goldman. Yeah, Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers tool, entrepreneurial business presence on the Council for Foreign Relations, acknowledged as young economic leader at Davos 2007 when the economy was just about to collapse. Neil Goldman was founder, chairman and CEO of Capital IQ until it sailed to the Standard & Poor's division of McGraw-Hill. That's the rating agencies, which is just like Klaus Moser's activity. They make up a set of numbers which are nothing to do with anything, and they charge for their services, and they allow investors to be cheated in massive frauds. There are 3 of them over the globe. One of them is based in Europe. I think the other 2 are in America. He is currently chairman and CEO of Relations Science, an innovative networking tool that the New York Times says could radically change the way Wall Street does business. Goldman was previously an investment banker at Lehman Brothers. He is a term member of the Council on Foreign Relations and in 2007 was named Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum. Brian O'Neill, responsible for half the world at the US Treasury and the foreign relations of the whole world, banking interests near the Sudetenland, which is where Hitler swept into. Brian O'Neill is Vice Chairman of Lazard International. He was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Western Hemisphere Affairs at the US Department of the Treasury until January 2009. He is previously the Chairman of Investment Banking for Canada and Latin America. Yeah, Canada, that is owned entirely by the Crown Templars still, with its Lubavitcher president, and Latin America with all of the militias in Shakira's countries at JP Morgan Chase. He is currently a member of the supervisory board of the Erste Bank in Vienna, a director of the Council of the Americas, and a life member of the Council on Foreign Relations. All of them secret societies. None of the transcripts come out. All of them work behind closed doors, like the Pythons and the Jokers and the Apostles at Cambridge. Frank Wisner, diplomat, masterminded the Egyptian political crisis, then a release of a military dictator who failed to prevent genocide. That's Mubarak, which is the same name as Shakira, but I do not trust them as far as I can spit. And the disappearance of its democratically elected but Muslim leader, that's President Morsi, and they have also got a massive scam going with their Coptic church. They would not allow me to talk to them because I was telling the truth, and they were afraid that the USAID budget would take them out under the tank tracks. Limited liability partner with previous globally. That's previous in the criminal sector. That's my summary of what they do. Windsor served as ambassador to India, the Philippines, Egypt, that's the Philippines with the massive storms, which were massive 5 miles away from Lapu-Lapu's beach. Lapu-Lapu was the person who killed Magellan on that beach. That place was untouched by the massive hurricanes and tornadoes that swept into the Christianity mission sector on those islands. Egypt and Zambia in a decorated diplomatic career that spanned 4 decades. He also served as Under Secretary of Defence for Policy and Under Secretary of State for International Security Affairs. He travelled to Egypt in January 2011 at the request of President Obama to help negotiate a resolution of the political crisis. Wisner served as Vice Chairman of External Affairs for AIG, which they've got on the jerseys of the All Black rugby team, and is currently Foreign Affairs Advisor at Patton Blogs LLP, Limited Liability Partnership. Nobody gets any blame or any criminal prosecution, even if the whole organisation is crashed and leaves all of their investors and customers in a negative equity situation. That's what they're there to do. General Sir Mike Jackson. So I've given you that again. He's not on Ergo's board, but he is active as a consultant, advisor and business contract facilitator. Formerly Britain's Chief of Staff Ground Forces, has advisory roles at Rolls-Royce. Yeah, we've heard about the directorship there and the involvement of university professors from the Russell Group and the University of Southampton. Okay, and business interests in PA Consulting. BAE are one of their prominent European clients. He is also a director in the Legion Group and Forces Elect, who cover the more domestic spectrum of parking attendants to security drivers' personal bodyguards. Now in Scotland they've begun to sack the state-paid parkies and replace them with private security forces people from his organisations. Sir Mike has had a long and controversial career, giving evidence on Bloody Sunday. He was a NATO figurehead in both the Balkans and the start of the second conflict in Iraq, led by George W. Bush and Tony Blair. Recently he retired, 2006, but has become embroiled in lobbying scandals which are registered on Hansard and been the subject of intense scrutiny even by the British press. That's in inverted commas. He got a lump sum of $230,000 and gets a pension of $80,000 annually in a $1.2 million state-funded package. That is registered on Hansard. Hansard Weapons Trading and MOD Property Beyond Retirement. That is a man with a registration of massive criminal takes for war crimes. Michael Moore, my MP, will not tell us what's on his Hansard record. Will you look at Michael Moore, my MP's entry on the House of Commons website, you find that Michael Moore, even although he's been on the cabinet, even although he's privy to the secrets of Dunblane, to the secrets of the Arms to Iraq inquests, and to all of the Scottish fatal accident inquiries into Chinook helicopter crashes, he is cowering in the corner for his massive crimes. Okay, back to Mike Jackson. He was christened the Prince of Darkness by his soldiers. His entire career overlapped with that of Michael Jackson, the pop musician. See images at the top of the page. The picture also shows Milosevic, who was given the death sentence for war crimes in Bosnia and the Balkans region, and is now an ideal investment opportunity for second homeowners all over Europe. This is my own writing on my own web page, and there you see that picture again of how you can get into the property sector. Now I forget what else I was going to show you. We started with the Red Nose Day thing. Gazprom, Aegis. Have we done the Aegis? I think that's enough for that video. So I've shown you how the people that were involved in World War II and the partitioning of Israel and Palestine run the fine arts sector. The man, Shimon Peres, is the president in Israel. The Knesset is part of the massive scams that we're seeing, and all of the private security businesses. It is just stunning that none of the people that are appointed into political positions are in doing anything for their country. They are all at the troughs like pigs,